Welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast, the podcast that can state confidently it will not be found in the Paradise Papers. This week on Heart and Hand, victory over Partick Thistle has them crying into their hipster beards. So welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, I'm your host, and I'm joined this week by Stephen Smith.
Good afternoon, David. How are you?
I'm good. The pod has been delayed slightly, as people may have noticed, and that was due to the fact that, as I have mentioned on the podcast before, I'm currently moving house, or in the process of it, and we're getting, there's light at the end of this particularly long tunnel, but the other day, there was a DIY emergency, so I did what any real red-blooded male would do, and I phoned my dad and said, can you come and fix this?
Absolutely.
And when he arrived, he decided to fix something else. Well, it involved, he said, can you just hold this table? It's got a sugary leg. Can you just hold it? And I'll go to work on it. So as I went to hold it, the leg on it collapsed, throwing everything downwards to where I was crouched, ready to hold it, including an enormous fucking brass clock. As some of you may know, my wife's a huge fan of vintage furniture and dangerous
vintage Art Deco furniture.
Yes, dangerous killing machine furniture. And this brass clock fell and smashed me right in the head, knocking me. Genuinely, I was as unintelligible as Scott Brown after a Surefoot of Lego, and lying there literally seeing stars, and not of the Brian Laudrup fashion. So. What made the experience memorable in a way was that I got a concussion out of it, which made the rest of the day absolutely unmemorable, as I couldn't remember much about it. But I will be touched by Sally's reaction when it was told to her what had happened. She said, "Is the clock all right?" And I said, yes.
Speaks antique stealer.
Yeah, I said, yes, the clock is all right. It's a big fucking brass clock whose fall was broken by my somewhat and now significantly softer head. So mild concussion suffered, and yesterday I sounded like a drunk. Today, if I say anything along the lines of, for manager, I would see what Dick Campbell is up to these days, then please, blame it on that. So if I make less sense than usual, you'll know what it is. But
okay.
So with that in mind, let's go back to Saturday, where obviously I will refer to my extensive notes because the last few days are a bit of a blur. But a fairly, and almost in a way, an almost enjoyably dull win, if that makes sense, because it looks on paper, and should always be to Rangers, Partick Thistle at home, a routine victory. That's just what it should be. And it was. Rangers didn't. I don't think they started particularly well.
Nope.
Thistle, who had clearly decided that they were looking to defend from the front. They had two strikers and they played.
Two up front.
Yeah, when I watched the game in the stadium, my thought was that they had 10 men behind the ball, and they didn't really. I mean, it was a defensively minded setup in terms of that the forward players had obviously been told what their job was. So they had two up front who were to press the goalkeeper and the defenders. And for half an hour, it kind of helped cancel us out. I didn't think we played with particularly much pace, and we struggled a little bit. However, when it was starting to get a little bogged down, an excellently worked corner, very, very well worked corner, led to a terrific ball into the box, and young Ross McCrory, great header, slams into the back of the net, 1-0, and from then Rangers relaxed and just began to play really good football, and before half time could have had another couple and deserved the other one they got when, after a magnificent run from Jason Holt, and also good work from Daniel Candeas, who made a run.
Yes, Candeas' run, Davy, as I said to you at the time, took two defenders away and created the space for Holt. So it was nice that he got the goal.
He got the goal because good save for the keeper, but it fell to Candeas. Still had a bit to do. It was a good finish. Into the second half, you got the impression that a goal would kill it, and after a few minutes it did, when a mistake from Thistle put Josh Windass clear, and looking like a different player from when I said this at the time. I don't think 2 weeks ago he scores that, but to me, he never looked like missing. He just got the ball, ran through, knew what he was doing, put it away. A confidence bred of the goal the week before, I think. After that, the game completely and utterly died. Rangers, I think, were happy and felt that they had done the job. Thistle, I thought, played quite well, but didn't really look as though they believed they were going to get back into it. Although they did make some good chances, and I thought particularly between the 60th and the 70th minute, Rangers were very, very flat and may well have conceded during that spell, but didn't. And in the end, as I say, almost a strange one, Stephen, in that at 3-0 I thought, we're on for 5 or 6 here minimum. And we then really did pretty much stop playing with the kind of verve we'd shown for the 5 minutes after half time and the 25 before it. And I felt that I understand that the players, maybe there's certainly been a lot of stuff going on around Ibrox, so maybe the players will just look, this is a good win, we'll just hold on to it. And it's typical Rangers fans, that we're leaving disappointed after a 3-0. But when you step back from that and thinking, we could have had 5 or 6, and you just look at the result in the context of the season, that was a solid 7 out of 10 more pleased performance.
Davey, what I was saying earlier on that I thought in terms of the performances against us, so the 2 previous performances that we've had against them where we've struggled and where it was a physical, scrappy game, I thought Rangers were much, much better, and I think that shows the improvement under Murty's guidance and tutelage. I think that's really quite impressive. And as you say, it was a comfortable 3-0 win. I thought it was a really good team performance. More than half of that team I thought played really, really well. And praise particularly for both for Wilson and Ross McCrory at the back. 19 years old and he looks like he was born to play there. And if nothing else comes out of this season, I'm impressed by the fact that McCrory not only got the nod ahead of Bruno Alves being fit again, but has shown that he can actually play. I think the Kilmarnock game is the only time this season when he's played, and I don't think he's performed particularly well. But he was by no means alone that night, as you and I both sat there and watched in horror as that unfolded. Yeah. So impressed with McCrory and Wilson. Tavernier as well, I've been a critic, but has been played well and is a confidence player, and because of that is playing well. Jason Holt and Ryan Jack and Candeas as well, all excellent, good team performances, full of energy, full of work. No team is ever going to outwork Rangers in midfield with those 3 playing there. So overall, I'm really pleased with it, and I agree with your synopsis in the sense that once we got to 3-0, the job was done and the players took their foot off the pedal. That's clearly they just thought, well, that's it, job done. We'll keep a clean sheet, and the rest of it was eminently forgettable.
Yeah, it was a tough watch into that second half, but I'm not going to be a hypocrite here if it's a case of being dreadfully bored in the last half an hour of a match because it's won already, then I will take that every week and every Rangers match that I'm quite happy to do. Now, I would agree with the players that you picked out there. I want to touch upon the McCrory Wilson ahead of Bruno Alves thing. Now, obviously, Graham Murty is highly, highly unlikely to take the job. Doesn't particularly want it, and certainly hasn't complicated matters for the board by throwing his name into the hat. So I think that Murty's passion remains youth development, and it's something that he is quite happy to go back to, and clearly is doing a decent job if you look at some of the youngsters that are coming through, because obviously we saw last season the likes of Aidan Wilson and even Miles Bierman, who's kind of been written off after a couple of dodgy performances, but I think still
David Bates as well.
I think there's something there with a few of those players. Jamie Barjonas has just signed a new 2-year deal, which is excellent because he looks another talented player. So there are, you can see the fruits of his labours, as it were. But because of that, there's almost a freedom to manage the way you want to, because Bruno Alves not playing is a big decision. And I think probably the biggest compliment, Stephen, I can pay Ross McCrory, as you're saying, he was selected ahead of Bruno Alves. I thought Wilson was selected ahead of Bruno Alves, if I'm being honest. I thought that McCrory would be playing regardless. Yeah. And I think that for me shows you where he has grown to in the pecking order, because I thought that he would play regardless, and for me it wasn't a surprise to see his name in the team sheet. It was a surprise to see Danny Wilson's.
Yeah, I don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves. The boy's only 19 and he's only played a handful of games, David, but I don't think any Rangers fan who's seen Ross McCrory playing this season can help but be excited at the prospect of this lad, because we are looking, in my view, and I'm just talking myself out of a job there, in the sense that I see him as a future Rangers captain if he continues on the trajectory I've seen. And we've forgotten, but that young Bates got an opportunity tail end of last season at centre half, and I thought had done really well. So clearly, some of the players you've mentioned there, Ryan Hardy being another one, that the future looks pretty. The future's bright, as the advertising phrase goes, and in terms of those youngsters coming through and hopefully providing the backbone of that side. And I thought, David, when we dropped down to the bottom division, I thought that was the opportunity for us to do that, to bring and blood those younger players and give them the opportunity to do that. And I think most of us think that was a wasted opportunity, but never mind, we are where we are, and we do have we've clearly got a club where those youngsters are seen and quoted and included in the first team squad, and that's really, really encouraging, that we're not, by a combination, I guess, of financial circumstances and where the club finds itself, we're kind of compelled to look to homegrown talent. But if it's players of the quality of Ross McCrory, then bring it on.
Yeah, for me, he is, I would say, certainly the most exciting youngster that we brought through. Obviously not in terms of style of play because of the position he plays, but in terms of his potential and his ability since Lewis McLeod. But that's countered, and I think quite correctly countered, if anyone wants to say to me, well, he's more impressive than that at this moment simply because of the level at which he's playing, then I'd have to agree with that. That Lewis McLeod was a standout, but it was primarily in lower division matches, and he is that, if you like, been thrown in the first team and is really earning his spurs. And I agree. I think it was a brave decision by Murty, but one born of the fact that I'm not going to be here long term. So I think Murty is conducting himself with a confidence born of the fact that it's not his first spell. He knows what the job as a temporary manager involves, and he's just quite happily getting on with it, and did well on Saturday. Although I would say that I thought his substitutions didn't work out on Saturday. I thought they made as well. While it's always delightful from an aesthetic point of view to see Nico Crancha, he was very poor when he came on, and he slows us down to a rate where I think we become very, very easy to play against. Now, the other two things that I wanted to talk about were, first of all, Alfredo Morelos, who is clearly going through a spell where he's annoyed at not scoring and possibly trying a little too hard. I would like to see somebody just take him aside and say, you don't need to worry because the goals will come and you do contribute to the side. And more than a lot of strikers I can remember us, certainly in the last few years, having, Morelos does contribute even when he isn't scoring. It's not a case of, in a sort of Kris Boyd style, that if you don't get a goal from him, you don't get anything. I think with Morelos, you still get the work rate, you still get his ability to chase down and to work defenders, you still get his ability to link up and to be involved in moves. But you could tell that there was a level of frustration to the way, you could tell by the body language, you can tell by his reaction to certain things, that it's grating on him that he's not getting a goal. And I'm not going to be unhappy about that, because I don't want strikers who don't want to score goals. I want strikers who are desperate, to be in the 6-yard box between the posts and get those goals. But I do think that it would benefit us if someone just takes him aside and say, relax, because you're a good player, you're a good finisher, they will come. I was really hoping actually on Saturday at 3-0 we got a penalty, because I thought that might be the ideal opportunity for him to put one away. But he just needs a goal, and I've absolutely no doubt that he'll then start firing again. But what are your thoughts on that, on Morelos' overall contribution and maybe this kind of dry spell he's going through?
Yeah, dry spells of the word I would use, David, and all strikers go through them, no matter how good they are. All strikers do, and I think it's helpful. First of all, I would say he does need to be played with a partner. I don't like to see him playing on his own with in theory, midfield players coming forward to support him, or a false number 9. He does need a partner, whether it be Miller or Herrera, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. It's nice to see Miller regenerated a bit and rejuvenated, and I'm not sure they're a great partnership, but I do think Morelos needs that partner. And I think the thing that interests me about him as a player is his work rate, because he either jogs about, practically at walking pace, or he's buzzing around, and he concentrates his energy when it matters, so he'll chase a ball down, and he created a goal earlier on. You remember when he nicked it off the goalkeeper earlier this season. So he's a pest for defenders. And I think he does need to be sat down. I'd agree with that as well, in the sense that he needs to just be sat down and assured. He also needs to be just talked. I don't want to see the edge coming off his game, because he's an aggressive, feisty young player. But he just needs to avoid the daft physical confrontations, because you and I know that referees in Scotland, in terms of the way they referee our football club, desperate to send him off any opportunity, throwing a daft hand out or an elbow. We're seeing far too much of that this season, when it's been exaggerated, and the level of cheating coming into the game this season has been depressing to watch. But they'll be desperate to send him off, so he needs to just calm that aspect of his game down. But the goals will come, David, if he's played up front with a partner, and we have a decent midfield feeding the ball to him through pretty quickly. I have every confidence that he'll give us a very good return. If not 20 goals, he'll be getting close to 20. I'd expect him to mid-20s at the end of the season, if all things are equal and he stays injury free.
I thought that Miller on Saturday was kind of back to the performances that had seen him out of the team, to be honest. I thought that there was a lot of running, but at times I couldn't tell you where he was supposed to be playing.
No, he couldn't either.
And then there were times that he had dropped into the middle of the midfield, and we looked as though we had a 4-5-1 going on. Never fault him for work rate, but his passing on Saturday was awful. His touch was off, and unfortunately, when Kenny's a game like that, you get a lot of running, you get a lot of physical action, but you don't really get any quality from him. And no. That's a slight concern, because we do look a little bit bereft of options. And the reason I say that is, certainly under Murty, now this obviously can change with a new manager, but Herrera has made no impact at all since he got those couple of goals, and I thought, right, here we go. But since then, he's had very, very limited game time. And Peña completely out of the squad. At the moment, there are some whispers coming that we might not see him again, and in fact both of them could be on their way in January. So it's interesting to see Ryan Hardy, in fact, has been given some game time, not a lot, but some game time. And does that speak to the fact that certainly under Graham Murty, but possibly going forward, that those two players have been written off as just bad signings?
Well, I hope not, David, because we invested a significant amount of money in them, and the bulk, they were the two, if I remember correctly, the two biggest money expenditures pre-season in terms of the board backing Caixinha, and these the two Mexicans leaving in January, and I'd be personally disappointed with that, and hope that they would get an opportunity to kind of settle in and develop. It may very well be that they came on a kind of personal recommendation, and they're Caixinha's players, and therefore if he's gone, they will want to go. And whether we recoup any of it's a thick end of £4 million, if I remember correctly, that we spent on both of them. That remains to be seen. But clearly, that in terms of the club's financial position, that would be pretty disastrous were we to do that. But I hope, particularly with in respect to Herrera, that we persevere. As I said to you last time I was speaking to you, but this is clearly not a target man. But he's got some very nice touches and a decent attitude for a striker, and I hope he gets a run. And as you say, we're not exactly blessed with multiple options up front, so I would like to see us persevere with that. Peña, I don't think, if he went, I don't think anybody other than Rangers accountant and anybody looking at our profit and loss sheet would crib about it, because after a few flashes, we haven't really seen anything that justifies the thought that he could hold down a spot in that midfield. You look at how industrious we are with Jack and Candeias and Holt in the midfield. Then Peña would stick out in that like a sore thumb. And at least with Nicol Cranchard, you always have the opportunity. You're going to get that middle to front pass, that unlock a defence, a bit of craft, a decent free kick, etc. But you don't get that with Peña. So I'd be really quite worried about that. But I think we've got some squad challenges as well, because if they're not there, then it shows that the squad's a lot thinner than it ought to be.
And a bit unbalanced.
And we'll come down, I hope, in terms of getting a manager before the January transfer window, into looking at maybe who we could sign to augment that squad going forward.
Now, Jason Holt is somebody I do want to give a particular mention to, because I thought he was the best player in the park against Hearts, and I thought he did another good game. He wasn't quite as good, but he did another good game on Saturday. And his emergence from, I would have said at the start of the season, cover and no more than that, and I don't really know anyone else who would have been particularly in a mood to disagree with that assertion. His arrival, if you like, from cover to contender for a first team spot, genuine, name that has to be considered, I think is one of the real bonuses of the last few weeks, because he's gone from being a player who could flit in and out of a game, or whose work rate was good but didn't really impact onto the match particularly at times, to someone who is doing a specific role but doing it very well. It's a limited role. We're not asking him to do things that he's not capable of doing, and we're not asking him to do 10 things well. We're asking him to do the 3 things he does well. And he's reacted to that, I think, brilliantly. But it's not just about how, his touch and his performance. There's a way a player carries themselves, and I think in the last few weeks, Jason Holt is carrying himself like a first team player, whereas before he carried himself like a guy who was trying to stay in the first team. And there is a difference, and I've been really impressed with him over the last few weeks, and I think he dovetails very well with both Ryan Jack and Graham Dorrans in a way that Dorrans and Jack together don't. And it's one of these interesting dichotomies. We've seen it before about that there are certain going back years and years and years, you had the situation where Mark Haitley and Ali McCoist together were a better option than any of the 3 featuring Haitley, McCoist or Johnson. Any of the other partnerships weren't as effective as that Haitley and McCoist one. And sometimes players just bounce off another one and their game goes well. And I think that with Holt, you put him with either Jack or Dorrans, and it, to me so far, looks more effective than when you have the Jack-Dorrans partnership. Although I would say that, if I'm being honest, if you were asking me to assess which of those 3 is the best player, I would have, Dorrans, Jack, Holt in that order. But yeah, at the moment, I would be struggling to leave Holt out of the side.
Yeah, agreed with that. I think it's great to see him back, and great to see somebody who has done very little wrong when he's been in a Rangers shirt getting his opportunity. We missed him really badly. I think the first time I really noticed it this season, David, was against Celtic. I mean, it was a bit of a shambolic performance at Ibrox, but I couldn't help thinking, and I might even have said to you at the time, that Holt would have, I think, made the difference between the two sides a lot narrower. Just with his energy, his ability to read and cover a counter-attack, and to make the spare man and keep possession going. And I think that last point is really why he works really well with Jack, because that's Jack's role. And if you look at the Carling Opta percentages in terms of passes and stuff, it's his ability to keep recycle possession and his pass completion really, really high. So if Holt's in the side along with Ryan Jack, I think Jack sees it as an opportunity for him to play a little bit further forward, be a bit more creative, and use that passing ability and strength that he has a little bit further up the park than just sit and keep the gate closed in front of the defence. So there's no question in my mind. You'll remember the difficulty we had when Stuart McCall and Ian Ferguson used to play. They would kind of get in each other's way, and I think that Jack and Holt have managed to crack that equation, even though they're similar players, and I would have no problem with both of them being in the midfield. We've clearly, David, got to see the best. We have yet to see the best of Graham Dorrans in a Rangers shirt, and I hope the spell and a recuperation and a reintegration into the side will allow us to do that, because he's a quality player, and as long as he's not injured and as long as he still has the legs, then I would expect him to be a key player for us in a way that he absolutely has not been so far in this season. He's been the major disappointment for me this season in terms of what I thought he would do and what he has actually delivered. So I think that the equation is still to be solved. And I think, as you know, I'm a big fan of Candeas as well. Happy to see him in midfield, because he can play up front. The quality, what I like about him is the fact that he is busy and industrious, and he does cover his ground both ways of the park. But the quality of his crossing and his final ball is improving markedly, and that's, I think he'd be a fixture going forward as well. I'm really pleased to see that one of Kashina's signings looks like he could cement a place in that Rangers side. So as a midfield, I would have those three, and it would be AN other, probably Dorrans. And we'd have to think a bit creatively about how that team is configured. But I guess that all depends on the new manager and whoever that's going to be, and what he sees that as.
No, obviously we will come to that. But before we leave Saturday, one of the kind of, you can't have Rangers winning without an attempt to stir up controversy, obviously, from media. Nope. And one of the things that I saw being reported was the alleged incident which saw a Partick Thistle fan thrown out of the ground, apparently, for, and this I say in inverted commas, for waving a saltire. And when you hear that, of course, on paper, as it's reported, you read that and you think, well, that's shocking. Imagine, being thrown out for waving a Scotland flag during a Scotland match. That wasn't actually what happened. What happened was that the fellow had a Scotland and Catalonia flag, and on the saltire was yes, very in the logo of the Scottish independence movement. So I believe that firstly, it always seems to get blamed on Rangers fans. This guy thrown out the ground. It's not us who do that. It's not the support. We don't have people thrown out the ground. I wish we could.
As well, lad.
Yeah, but we're not.
There'd be an empty Broomland stand twice a year for sure. If that was the case.
Absolutely, and so that doesn't happen. We don't have that power, sadly, to throw people out of the ground. So a decision like that is taken by stewards and the police. And to be honest, the people who are most at risk of being thrown out for nothing at Ibrox are Rangers supporters, as we've found out over the years. That we're the ones who kind of suffer under that jackboot a little bit more than any others. But the reason he was thrown out was quite clearly because it's the political banners at a ground thing. Now, we know that argument about when you're allowed to use it and when you're not depends on the colour of shirt that you're wearing in Scotland. We know that. But in this incident, I think a lot of it was to do with his timing of it, because it was brought during the Remembrance Day celebrations, which, as usual at Ibrox, were beautifully and immaculately observed, and a wonderful display in the Sandy Jardine stand. And obviously it's a question of timing, and it's a question of what exactly the reaction he was looking to get was. Personally, I think it's an odd thing to take to a football ground. It wouldn't occur to me to turn up with a no banner or a you or I, much as we are committed to it. I don't think either of us have thought of turning up at Ibrox with a Vote Labour banner. So even Scott, most weeks leaves his Margaret Thatcher forever T-shirt in the house. So it was a kind of strange one, but yet, as I say, the undertone being that this poor fellow was thrown out the ground by nasty Rangers fans for the audacity of waving a saltire. It simply wasn't true, and what it was clearly a kind of somewhat pathetic attempt to deflect attention from from a significant event that was going on, an event incidentally that was mirrored every ground in the UK at the weekend, and in fact was marked by every club wearing a poppy except one club who have no class and don't know how to behave.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on this, David, I think are the same as most decent people, and that if there is, the laws need to be applied consistently and evenly to everybody, including those you don't agree with. So, I mean, if there is a ban, as I believe there is on, certainly at a UEFA level, on political, what they call political banners, what they have in mind there are things to do with, let's say, Catalonian separatism or political causes, then a ban is a ban is a ban, and that means everybody is banned from any political expression. Now, I think the challenge that we've had is that there have been numerous expressions of political views articulated, huge banners, particularly at Celtic Park, and particularly by our friends in the Green Brigade, who believe that It's their right to express their support for violent Irish republicanism, or their support for Scottish independence, or for Catalonian independence, or whatever it might be. And actually, if the law says that that's not the case, it's not the case, and therefore certainly the club shouldn't be enabling that, as I believe Celtic have done. And the second, that the authorities should be enforcing that, because if that's the case, then it's about the politics you don't agree with that matter. That's your test, your acid test of liberal society. Personally, I'm not a supporter of Catalonian independence. I understand many of the arguments around it, but there's an economic selfishness and a narrow nationalism that I have a concern with, any more than I'm a supporter of Scottish independence. But if Rangers fans are going to be pulled up for expressions of unionism and denied the opportunity to have banners into grounds that express that, or let's say support for Northern Ireland remaining part of the United Kingdom, as a big section of our support believes and supports in, then that's fine. But we want the same standards applied to everybody, and either as a blanket ban on political expression at football grounds, or we take a more grown-up attitude to it and say it's allowed as long as it doesn't encourage, let's say, racism or fascism or any of the stuff that's clearly beyond the pale. So I think we're just looking for, as we always do in this circumstance, consistency, fairness, and equal treatment.
I don't particularly care, I'll be honest, if someone, as you say, wants to turn up. And I think it's this week's cause du jour, and I have absolutely no doubt that the Ruperts and Tarquins in the Thistle support were very keen to, because this week it's Catalonia, they're all suddenly huge followers of Catalonian independence, and bringing a 3-year-old yes flag to a football match, I just think is beyond sad, to be honest. But if that floats your boat, go for it. But you're right, there are rules. You're not allowed to do it. It works both ways. And if you were asked by the police not to fly it, which is what would have happened, let's not pretend for a second that they saw this and threw the guy out immediately. That is highly unlikely. Much as we all know the police are incredibly heavy-handed at football matches, the banner would have been taken, and then the person obviously has kicked off and has been thrown out. So it's I think a rather pointless thing to do. You can't claim that turning up with a yes banner is not political, because that's entirely what that logo was for and what it relates to is a political movement. So it's foolish. It's designed to get attention for the person doing it. And as I've always said, to me, it's a lack of ability to see yourself, because you are a walking cliche. If you're a Partick Thistle fan who has a banner that's got a Catalonia flag and a Scotland yes flag, then you are a cliche. You absolutely are. As I've said before, you are absolutely a kumquat eating, craft beer drinking tosspot, and I know everything about you and every opinion you have before you open your stupid West End mouth to say it. And it was quite apparent, and you can just see him sitting in the pub afterwards going, "Hey Rebecca, hey Fraser." I was like totally throwing out the game there. It was just such a shocker, and those fuck them. Just do one. You're boring, you're childish, and none of us can be arsed with your pish. So I think that's generally my feeling on it as well. But I do think that the reporting of it was interesting. As I say, the kind of undertone of look what these nasty Huns did, when it was quite frankly nothing to do with us, and we didn't really give a fuck. The day that we care about what Partick Thistle do about anything or think about anything is the day that I'm going to go and take up tiddlywinks, because that's when it's gone beneath us, quite frankly.
Aye, absolutely. I mean, I have a kind of healthy disdain for what appears to be the SNP's intelligentsia. They can't see a bandwagon without jumping on it. And the Catalan issue, which is a complicated one, is rooted in economics and Spain's sense of nationalism. And I've got friends that live in Andalusia, and I spoke to them about it, and one of them being a former Labour mayor of Thetford, my friend Mary Page. Mary's she's a Labour Party member, progressive. She's a member of PSOE over there in Spain, so she's she looks at things through that lens, and she's not a supporter of Catalan nationalism, and she expresses it in terms of it being a very selfish thing. I mean, in terms of the yes, the whole yes thing, David, I mean, they just need to you lost, get over it, right? You lost, get over it, is a simple one. And they can cry into your soy, low-fat latte over your quinoa sandwich if you want about that. But the fact is that we need to move on beyond this, and we need to stop, I think, nonsense about perpetuating it. And the SNP are only using it as an excuse to try and revitalise the corpse of Scots nationalism, which, as we know, in terms of the economic indicators and all the rest of it, is still a Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, back to football. Ryan Jack called up to the Scotland squad for the match against, I have no idea, Holland. There you go. Hey, what about that?
Hey, well done.
Didn't see,
I didn't know
that. Jock Tamson's bearing me. Telling you, I'm going to wear a skirt and show my arse to passers by while pissing in doorways. Just make me a lieutenant in the Tartan Army. But Ryan Jack called up, and I think deserved on form this season. I think he's maybe gone off the boil the last couple of weeks. No wonder, with his head being messed with the constant red card being rescinded circus that went on around him. But I wanted to talk about the comments. Now, there's been some chatter about Ryan Jack because the match is at Pittodrie. And incidentally, I think that's something that I've long advocated, that I think that moving friendlies in particular, or if you like, the lower interest fixtures around the country, I think is a good idea. Especially because increasingly large parts of the Scotland support are drawn from the provincial clubs. So there's nothing wrong with that, and it's hardly anything new. I mean, I remember going to see a Scotland match at Rugby Park in the 90s, so it's hardly anything new. But obviously Ryan Jack, Aberdeen, now playing for Rangers, there's obviously an issue there, and to such an extent that the Scotland stand-in manager and performance director Malky Mackay has said that he's actually had to say publicly that we hope that the player doesn't get booed. And that's quite a staggering indictment of the relationship between Rangers and the rest of Scotland, is it not?
It's staggering is exactly the word I would use, David. My concern, and obviously it kind of leads on from the previous conversation about the split that the independence referendum and the nastiness and the unpleasantness that it engendered, I think that it lingers on. But it's also, and let's not kid ourselves here, this is also about a hatred for Rangers, because if you're going to excuse, in inverted commas, behaviour or anticipated behaviour on the basis that Ryan Jack went from Aberdeen to Rangers, and it's in this so-called rivalry that the clubs have, and actually it's the sort of rivalry that Manchester United have with Stockport County, then I don't really think it's a sustainable argument, because the same would have applied to Barry Ferguson, to Ian Black, to Lee Wallace, to Alan McGregor as well, all of whom were booed playing for Scotland, and let's face it, all of them were booed by a section of Scotland support that is motivated by jealousy, envy, sectarianism, call it what you will, but it's about Rangers, it's about them playing for or having played for Rangers. So that's a major, that schism between our club and our support and the Scotland support. And I remember when I was a kid, Rangers fans formed the bulk of the Scotland support, and we still have provided more international footballers for Scotland than any other football club. We have a line rampant in the middle of our club badge. Rangers are a quintessentially Scottish and British club, but there's a real danger now of that being totally separated. And the fact that neither you or I, both of whom are football men, could think who Scotland were playing in an upcoming friendly, I think tells a very interesting tale.
I grew up, and people ask me this, we have actually a question and answer pod coming up during the international break, and people ask me, were you ever a fan of international football? And yes, I was a huge fan of international, huge Scotland fan growing up, and one of the things that I always enjoyed about it was the putting aside of rivalries, and maybe it's because I was younger and more naive, more idealistic, but I always had the impression that it was very much, right, we put aside our club differences for this. Mm-hmm. And we go and we all follow Scotland, and we want to see the best team picked, and we want to see the best players, etc. And obviously it was a more exciting era, when you could call the type of players that Scotland could call back in those days, then obviously it would be something of huge interest. But it was genuinely, and everyone kind of mucked in together and pulled together, and it felt like that, and I liked that. But increasingly, and I'm sure that fans of Diddy clubs will point to say, oh well, it was Souness and it was you spending and you did this and you did that, but there increasingly became this us and them point, to the point where I just felt I don't feel welcome in this. And more importantly, I began to feel that if they wanted a double standard, in that they wanted to be able to, boo our players with impunity, or behave badly and disrespectfully towards us as Rangers fans in that community, but we weren't allowed to turn around and say, well, hang on a minute here, hasn't something been lost? And I think for a group and a support that pride themselves on their good behaviour and their inclusiveness and their friendliness, I think that's a glaring contradiction right at the heart of it. The fact that while you're so proud of going around the world and making friends, again in inverted commas, and being ambassadors for the country and all that, which is great and a good intention and something that you should want to do, but against that, well, yeah, you have people in your own country who don't feel welcome, who don't feel a part of it, and you have the situation where a player from your country, from one of the major clubs in your country, being called up, the manager has to refrain from calling, put his phone down and refrain from calling people of other nationalities by offensive stereotypical names, and actually come out and say, please don't boo this player. And to me, I think that's like I say, it's a dreadful situation to be in. And like I say, I remember after having drifted away from Scotland, I decided, this is ridiculous, I'm going to go along and I'm going to try and get back into this. I have as much right to watch Scotland as anyone else, all that kind of stuff. And Ian Murray was playing for Scotland at the time. I remember sitting about me at Hampden. He misplaced a pass, as unfortunately Ian Murray was wont to do. He wasn't a world beater, I think we all know that, but he had been selected, and therefore he was wearing the shirt, and therefore you get behind him. And he misplaced a pass, and dozens of people around me, that stupid Hun. And you're kind of like, how would you guys feel if I sat here and a Celtic player misplaced a pass and I shouted out, stupid, Union word? You would be very upset, quite rightly, with me for doing it, because I was clearly not able to leave my baggage at the door. Of course, that's not something we would do. It's not something I would do. It's not a behaviour that is appropriate to that ground. But it is that double standard of, look how great we are, look how inclusive we are, look how open we are, fuck the Huns, we don't want them involved and we don't want them following the team. And I find it ridiculous. And the other side of the coin, something that I also find quite offensive, are, if you like, there's nothing wrong with being a Rangers supporter, by the way, who follows Scotland. That's your right, and you're entirely welcome to do so, and you should, because it's your country and you reclaim it. But don't be a tame Hun. Don't be one of these ones that goes, well, I'm a Rangers fan, but I'm alright. Fuck that, right? Get off your knees, and if you hear that sort of behaviour, deal with it and either make your decision. If it offends you, you say it offends you. For me, it offended me so much that I just got up and went. I was like, I'm not putting up with this shite, But for Rangers supporters, if you wish to be part of the Tartan Army, then I think you've got to be vocal about it and say that I'm not prepared to put up with this. And I wasn't. I made the decision to walk away from it. If your decision is that you're going to stay, then you've surely, if you stay in an organisation where there's something wrong, you've got to stay and fight it. I didn't care enough to do that. And at the time, obviously I was involved in the trust and had bigger battles at home, if you like, kind of thing. So it's an interesting one. And I like I say, I would hope that we all know it's going to happen. And I think it's a sad reflection that Scotland managers have to come out and ask this before they select players from Rangers, because in the next few years more and more players will be getting selected. McCrory's a good example of someone you would hope would go in and get caps. And what's going to happen when we have these young star players coming through? Do they face a kind of trial by fire playing for the national team? Because that's not on.
No, it isn't, and your patriotism oughtn't to be questioned in that way, David. And nor is being patriotic about being a Scot and supporting the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Those are not incompatible positions. And there's a rich irony here, isn't there, that Malcolm Mackay, who let's not mince words, is an anti-Semite, a racist, a misogynist, a homophobe, and an ex-Celtic man, is having to defend a Rangers player potentially from the very real prospect of abuse. He wouldn't have said anything if it hadn't been the talk of social media amongst the sort of people who are going to abuse Ryan Jack. So therefore, what they're saying is, no matter how well he plays, because he is now a Rangers player I'm going to abuse him because there's a green light there. And that's because our assigned role in this society that we're in is we're the bogeyman. We're seen as almost like a hybrid between a Viking raid and a BNP meeting, and it's an absolute fallacy. It's completely untrue and a disgrace. But that's the common parlance, and that's what explains why people are given licence to use sectarian abuse about Rangers fans. Hunt is an anti-Protestant epithet. It's sectarian. I don't care how it's misused. It's not a word that Rangers fans use to describe themselves. And the fact that our feelings and our views on that are just disregarded, I think, is symptomatic of that marginalisation and caricature of where the Rangers support finds itself. It's an absolute double standard. And the problem I think I have, David, is that we're going to end up in the same position, I think, as essentially as the Manchester United support has in England for a whole variety of reasons. They would find themselves, because of how successful the club was, abused and not welcomed amongst the wider England support. So they just shrugged their shoulders and said, well, club over country every time, shrugged their shoulders, walked away from it, and their support, no matter what you feel about their club, if you go to an away game United involved, they're there. They back their team 100%, they're extremely vocal and they're extremely parochial in their support for Manchester United, club over country every time. And that is where I think the Rangers support is going to end up unless something pretty drastic happens. Personally, politically for me, I'm a socialist and not a nationalist, which is why I have a problem with the SNP. But we're going to end up, I think, painted into a corner here unless something pretty drastic happens. I don't have an easy answer to it, but that's the journey we're on at the moment.
The other thing about this, just before we move on, is Kris Boyd, who is a part-time Kilmarnock footballer and full-time Rangers pundit for the national media these days. And Kris Boyd's comment about Ryan Jack was, why is he being selected? He's had more red cards than good performances this season. Kris Boyd is the captain.
That one red card there, David, because he's had one red card.
He's had one red card, 2 rescinded, one against Chris's club when Kris, who's the captain of that club, one of his players behaved disgracefully to get another pro sent off. But surely there is something about... Now, if I was a Kilmarnock supporter, I would be really royally fucked off about the amount of time that this guy spends talking about another football club in the same division. But on top of that, it's not the done thing. And since when did players who are currently playing feel free to pass judgment like that on other players? It should be remembered as well that Kris Boyd wasn't exactly Dennis Law when it came to pulling on a navy blue shirt either, and I think that the criticism, while being first of all wrong, just simply wrong, was incredibly disrespectful from one pro to another. And I would almost forgive it were it a professional Tim or an extremely bitter halfwit a la John Hartson. But for a guy who is being invited onto these shows because of his supposed Rangersman credentials, I thought that comment was absolutely pathetic.
Yeah, he's a poor man's Chris Sutton, David. I'm thinking back, it's not that long. It's only a couple of weeks ago I actually applauded him off the park. When we played Killie midweek, and I wish I hadn't done that because he's clearly an attention seeker, a professional. His opinions are. Part of the reason why I guess his opinions are sought is that they are hostile to and unfriendly to Rangers. They're extremely parochial. But you're right, it's the guy plays. If you're a Kilmarnock fan, if you were watching the game at Ibrox, you'd be going, well, this is a guy who gets to commentate on, pass judgment on Rangers, and he's playing against them now. Now, I didn't think he played very badly against us the other night, but you have to talk about the kind of peculiarity that the Scottish media don't believe they can find anybody more qualified, more articulate, or more even-handed than Kris Boyd to pass judgment on Rangers Football Club. It's bizarre. Yeah,
we spoke earlier about Tame Hun, and he's certainly aiming for the in-house pet market there with those sort of comments. As I say, I just thought it was a fairly shocking thing for for a current pro to say about a fellow current pro, but over and above all that, it was wrong. I mean, it simply was incorrect.
Yeah.
And there you go. I mean, there's Scottish football punditry in a nutshell. You can come on here and spout absolute shite, so long as it's anti-Rangers, we're quite happy with it. And it was just a nonsense. And again, it feeds into that kind of frenzy of people will justify the booing of Ryan Jack with the words, well, he didn't deserve to be in the squad. That, I guarantee you, that will be something that's thrown forward, and it's just complete and utter pish. But you know, as I say, each to their own. I'm one of these guys who will, admit it. I cannot wait for the international break to be over. I find them disruptive, annoying, and pointless. But we shall see. That happens in a couple of weeks. Now, it would be remiss of me to finish this pod, Stephen, without asking you: are you a Rangers supporter?
I'll be a lifelong Rangers supporter, David. In fact, my mother was pregnant with me in 1962 watching Rangers playing, I think it was Seville. It would be August or September 1962. She was pregnant with me and at Ibrox with my father. So I arguably have been going to Ibrox certainly for about 6 decades, isn't it, or 7? But certainly it's a lifelong journey for me. So absolutely.
Well, that's become the sort of question on everybody's lips up here because of the Emergencies Paradise Papers. One of the people involved in it was Celtic owner Desmond Decker, who these days has changed his look back from the days when he sang the Israelites. He now Desmond now looks like Kaiser Wilhelm, but he was doorstepped, I suppose is the word, by Mark Daly on his way out. Well, it wasn't a doorstep, but certainly car jumped on his way into Celtic Park by Mark Daly, the BBC investigative reporter, and asked about some what appeared to be on paper very dodgy tax affairs. His response, staggering in its childishness, was to send a letter to the BBC tagging various people at the BBC, and it opened with the line, "Are you a Rangers supporter?" It just shows you that at that club the level of paranoia knows no bounds. Now, we'll be very careful here because Mr. Decker is obviously far richer than us, far more powerful, and has media acolytes, and certainly legal.
As well.
Yes, so I have no idea whether or not he did what Mark Daly alleges that he did. But what a comment, to kick off a letter. And it's very difficult to take someone seriously when the response to this sort of allegation is to try and throw up that smoke screen. And we all know what the implication is. That's the thing. We all know what the implication is. And talk about reverting to type, eh?
Well, having done it to Mark Daly as well, that's the bizarre thing. This is the filmmaker behind the men who sold the jerseys, who, let's just put it this way, didn't exactly do Rangers Football Club any favours at all in that. So I mean, it's like accusing Tommy Boyd of being a Hun would be the equivalent of it. And as you say, rich people, when they're hiding their tax affairs, David, don't like to be questioned about these things. Please leave me alone and just let me dodge as much tax as I can, appears to be the default position. So I think Dermot is exactly the same in that regard. I'm not saying too much because we'll get into very political territory very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. But as I say, we don't know what all we have to go on are these reports, and that I'm sure that the good thing about it is that when it comes to Celtic and tax, they have around about 60,000 tax experts that go every week. Not who am I kidding? They have about 40,000 tax experts and some tax expert banners on the top of the stand. Yep. But so these guys who of course were so offended by what happened at Rangers because, as I'm sure we all remember, but hospitals, but schools. I'm sure that should anything be proven that there have been tax issues involving anyone at Celtic, well, I'm sure that the moral crusaders among their support will be absolutely heartbroken and will immediately call for change and will question their support at the club, because we all know that the moral high ground that they occupied during Rangers travails, it would be hypocritical to a level of unbelievable scale should the as I say, these tax experts suddenly find that they're not quite as concerned about the poor nurses as they were 2 years ago, for example. Yeah.
No, it'll be... I'd absolutely put the kettle on for it being a cause célèbre at next AGM. I fully expect Jeanette Finlay to raise it as a major issue, and there'll be a pay your tax website set up to which anonymous journalists can contribute. And no doubt that win in the war, and there'll be, and I'd expect it to be in the front page of every Scottish newspaper and the back page for that matter, in exactly the same way, David, that the fact that only one football club in the United Kingdom didn't wear a poppy in Remembrance Weekend, in exactly the same way that the serious journalistic questions were asked as to why that was, what the motive and the explanation for that was.
Yes, no, I'm sure we'll get all that, but I've had a very severe bang on the head this week, mate, so, but that possibly explains my certainty on that one. Okay then, folks, that's pretty much it for this week. Now, obviously it's an international week, which means the return of our Q&A pod, which will be with you this Friday, but of course, as always, is contingent upon you guys sending in questions. So if you have any questions for me that you want answered, it can be about anything at all related to football, but obviously I prefer if you stuck to Rangers, but anything you want me to hear me discuss, please let me know. My time in the trust, what's been going on, the history of the pod. I know that a couple of people were intimating to me that they wanted to find out a bit more about the pod's origins, etc. So anything at all, you just get in touch with us on Twitter using the hashtag HHPod, so that's hashtag HHPod, and I'll sort out all the questions. Please use the hashtag, because when I come to collate them all together, that's far easier, and it means you've got far less chance of being missed. If Twitter's not your thing and you want to use the Facebook, then just go to Facebook and search for Heart and Hand Rangers Podcast and pop your question up there. I'll be more than happy to answer any of those. Then next week we will have one of our special pods detailing something back in Rangers history. That's something to look forward to. And then obviously back before the next home match, which is in a couple of weeks' time, we will have our usual preview pod. So all of that to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. So please get in touch that way. You can also visit our YouTube channel, which now has its own proper URL, which is just youtube.com/C/Heart and Hand Pod. So that's all you need to do, /C/Heart and Hand Pod when you go to YouTube, and we'll pop up. But you can just search and we'll pop up. And there's a selection of really good videos there, I think, and even one from the concourse at Ibrox on Saturday just before I left, with my very immediate post-match thoughts, some of which I haven't watched the game back. I changed my mind about, and that's something that I think will be a theme this season. I think it's always interesting to compare the feelings on 90 minutes and then the feelings a day or so later after having watched the game back on TV. I think that provides an interesting sort of counterpoint to that. All that remains for me to do is to thank our executive producers in London, Mr. Mike Lee and Mr. Paul Miles, to thank my guest, Mr. Stephen Smith.
Thanks a lot, David. Hopefully next time we have a conversation we might be closer to appointing a manager.
That's the dream, and that is something that, as I say, we've kind of not got into today because we did a lot on the pod last week, but we'll have more on that. And should anything happen in this next 2 weeks, we will have a breaking news pod and obviously a breaking video. So please be aware that we won't leave you kind of hanging on that one, as it were. We'll get that information out, or we'll get our thoughts on anything that happens with that out to you as soon as possible. Okay then, folks, my name's David Edgar. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'll talk to you again on Friday. Cheers, bye.